Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the news that Nigel Farage is once again taking over the leadership of Reform UK, at least for the general election campaign, as well as standing in Clacton, Essex, the area which UKIP did best in, actually winning a Westminster seat a while ago. But what will this mean for the election itself? But first, it is worth discussing how this was being reported early in the day. Various commentators were wondering if the announcement was that Farage was doing a deal with the Tories. And even since this announcement, I've seen the suggestion, oh, you can see how this works. Nigel Farage now does a deal with the Tories. He says, look, you leave me alone in Clacton so that I can win the seat. And I will, Reform UK will stand some candidates down in marginal seats where we've got far-right Tory MPs, blah, blah, blah. In reality, the Tories would be mad to go for such a deal. Also, I think the idea is that then Nigel Farage becomes an MP and then, he can run for leadership of the Conservative Party. There's so many ifs in there. I think Nigel Farage is too lazy to want to do that. The Tories aren't stupid enough to want him to do that. And even if the Tories did go easy on him in Clacton, it doesn't mean to say he would win the seat at all. In fact, he'd be still quite unlikely, I think. But, at the same time, it is a one where he'd have the best chance. It's the most friendly area to Reform UK in the country. I wondered myself if the announcement was just so that he could sell a new line of alcoholic drinks. I want to put it past him. But the announcement itself was too late for me to get the video out for my usual 5 p.m. slot. These people have got no respect for my schedule, no respect at all. As it happened, the announcement began that Farage would take over from Tice as leader of Reform UK. And I thought, this makes sense. This makes more sense than deal with the Tories or standing himself. But then he announced he would be standing as a candidate in Essex as well. And I thought, well, this makes less sense. I mean, yeah, he's picked the seat he'd be most likely to win. And Farage is by far and away the best placed candidate that Reform UK could possibly find to contest that seat. But he's still more likely to lose than win. I'll be honest, I thought he'd got sick of losing Westminster elections, especially after that unfortunate business with the Dolphin. I don't see this affecting him joining Trump on the presidential campaign, grifting his way around America this autumn. And he may imagine that Trump is now less likely to win since the convictions, so he could have lost hope of a lucrative long-term job on the other side of the Atlantic, which may explain why Farage ruled out standing last week, but is going, all right, I'll stand this week. There are other possibilities as well, including a rumoured bust-up with Tice. Besides, although he's announced that he will lead Reform UK for the next 5 years, let us not forget that he's ruled things in and out before without actually meaning them. This is the same man who in 2019 insisted the Brexit Party would be standing MPs in every seat in Britain and then pulled candidates from all of the Tory seats. He also said he would leave Britain if Brexit were a disaster. He's since said that Brexit's a disaster, but is still stubbornly remaining on our shores. Like a skid mark you just can't shift no matter how great Vanish claims to be. So there was never any point in believing Farage when he said he wouldn't stand. You could have believed it on the basis that he didn't want to fail for a record 8th time to win a Westminster seat, but not on the basis that he ruled it out. But how does this affect the electoral landscape now? Well, as far as I'm concerned, Reform UK exists purely to terrorise the Tory party into becoming a committed far-right party in the long term. It exists to surgically insert the fascism of the likes of the BNP into the established brand, which is the Conservative Party, which will attract an awful lot of votes, even for people who don't like what they're doing, just because of habit. And then attempts to actually introduce fascism in Britain, which we've resisted for so long, as soon as Labour start failing again. But to do this, they have to scare the Conservative Party into thinking it's impossible to ever win elections again unless they can come to some accord with Reform UK, give the Conservatives the choice, either lose every election from here on in or become a fascist party, which would you prefer? The Conservatives have already proven in the past that they will prioritise winning elections over any principles they may have. So to do that, Reform UK have to take a lot of votes off the Tories at this election. They need to be able to claim they cost the party far too many seats to be able to have any hope of forming a strategy to win power with Reform UK as part of the mix. But despite the voting intention polls, Reform UK are unlikely to do that well. They really want to recapture the fear UKIP inspired in the Tories in 2015, but the circumstances don't really exist anymore. And Reform UK simply doesn't have the infrastructure. But Nigel Farage is a genuine star player for them, absolutely hated by most of the population. But such is his extreme Marmite nature, lauded as some sort of like cult prophet by the section of the population who do align with his politics. Farage standing does a couple of things. First, it gives Reform UK a possible crack at winning a seat, albeit slim. The seat was a toss-up between Labour and the Tories. Now, almost certainly Labour. Farage is unlikely to win, but he does represent their best chance. Can't rule it out completely. It is a risk for Farage because he's chosen the most gammon place in the country to stand. If he fails, he will look a proper tit. Second, the media will inevitably fawn all over him, and with the legitimacy of now being a candidate and a party leader, he can attract more attention from the media and therefore win over more support for his party across the country. This is the major prize for Reform UK. It boosts their chances of becoming a sort of Tory party bogeyman. Previous polling had suggested that Farage taking a leading role in the campaign would persuade more people to vote Reform UK. So this now becomes interesting. We're having a little flurry of MRP polls dropping. Will Farage's inclusion render them partially defunct already? Consider that when an MRP model says that the Conservatives are likely to win X number of seats, like there's been a couple of MRPs dropped today, the most credible of which was a new YouGov one, which I haven't really gone through yet. But generally speaking, what you find in these ones is it'll say, oh, the Conservatives are going to win so many seats, like the YouGov one, it's like 140 seats, and you think, oh, we're never going to beat them into second place like that. But, and I haven't checked out this one yet, but in all the others, and I've no doubt it'll be the case in this one as well, what you'll find is there'll be a lot of seats that it says the Tories will win, but by a wafer-thin majority, like only just. Sometimes you've got like half the seats that the Conservatives would win only being won by like a few points. And remember, 5 points is basically the margin for error anyway. So there's wild variation in the number of seats that current polling shows the Tories capable of winning. And consider that polling at the moment shows the gap between Labour and the Conservatives widening. Some of these polls show, the Tories that would get 100 to 150 seats. You knock off a couple of points and all of a sudden they're down on like 60 to 70. Farage standing is really bad news for the Conservatives. Imagine that he, in addition to everything else, may take an extra 1 or 2 points off the Tories himself. It's certainly going to panic some Tory candidates. Expect Sunak to come under increased pressure to do more of the wrong things even louder now, which actually may help to make them even more unelectable. Farage only has to cost the Tories 1 or 2% of votes extra in key marginals, and his announcement today could cost the Tories loads of seats. He could be the difference between the Tories being embarrassed with their worst result in 200 years and actually being in third place, which is a whole new level of humiliation for them, one to which they are not remotely accustomed. Speaking of which, I will be doing a video on just how tight the race is for the Lib Dems to get into second place at some point this week, much closer than it might look on the headline figures. Now, all of this, of course, is assuming that Farage can shift the dial noticeably. He has left it late. Really, he should have been doing this a long time ago. Reform would have liked to have paraded him around the country already. He'll presumably have to focus quite a bit of time on his target constituency now, even though he's supposed to be leading the party. There are two major areas of uncertainty here which are not sufficiently tested. First, are Reform UK really worth the value given in current polling? Because I kind of feel not, due to the lack of an on-the-ground campaign. Their campaign seems to be largely remote through social and mainstream media. So you could actually conceivably be in a position where Nigel Farage does add a couple of points to Reform UK, but it looks like he doesn't because they don't do as well as the polls would suggest. Second, will Farage have a significant effect on the vote beyond the constituency he's standing in? It's clear he'll have an effect in Clacton, absolutely clear. Will he have an effect beyond that in places where he's not personally standing? There have been polls in the past which suggested he might, but not enough pollsters have explored this for me to be confident. So we will see. But this will definitely be worrying news for the Tories. Pretty good news for the Lib Dems, as well as anyone who wants to see the Tories beaten down harder than they've been beaten us down. And people in Essex have just had the stakes raised. Going to be embarrassing enough if they vote Priti Patel and Kemi Badnoch batting into Parliament, as seems likely. But if they also make Nigel Farage an MP, they may have to get used to being national pariahs. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.